Hi everyone, welcome to another session of Project Nazareth. We're now kind of in the final swing of our sessions with Project Nazareth for this year. And these last few weeks, we're going to focus on the Eucharist, the great gift that Jesus gives of his very self to us, of his body and blood, soul and divinity that we are able to receive and be nurtured and nourished by. And so this week, as we start the lessons, we're going to be talking about how God provided for his people with the manna in the desert, and then using that to help us understand the gift that Jesus is going to give. And this, especially, Jesus talks about this. It's in the Gospel of John chapter 6, called the Bread of Life Discourse. John 6, the Last Supper accounts, and the first letter of the Corinthians give us the crux of our understanding about the Eucharist. But to understand what Jesus talked about in John 6, you have to go back to the book of Exodus. That in the time of Exodus, that's the time of Moses, when God, using Moses to free the Israelites who had been in slavery in Egypt and persecuted and suffering tremendously, that God frees them. And after the Passover, they leave Egypt. They go through the passing of the Red Sea, heading their way to the Promised Land, and now this new experience of freedom. But then they wander in the desert for 40 years. But as they begin that wandering in the desert, the people at times begin to doubt God. They complain against God in many different ways. But one of the things was when they faced hunger. And they complained that they have no food and life was better as a slave. And so Moses turns to God in prayer, and God responds by providing for the people. And that's what is called the manna. What it was every day, the people would wake up in the morning and they'd find on the ground these flakes. They did nothing to try to grow these flakes. And it's wherever they moved at times, those flakes would always show up the next morning on the ground. They would gather the flakes together and they would make bread from it. And that's why I referred to this bread from heaven. They knew they did nothing to grow these flakes and be able to make the bread. And so it's God's proving to them, and God did it every day for 40 years. God gave them this manna. The moment they entered into the Promised Land, the manna ceased. But it's this physical nourishment that God gave to them. And it helped them in faith to know God was with them. But yet God also knows we need more than just physical food. And that's what God is going to give to us when Jesus talks about this in the Bread of Life Discourse. That after he had performed this multiplication of the loaves and fishes, using 5 loaves and 2 fish, Jesus feeds thousands of people. Because they've been following him, they're hungry, they're tired, and so he performs this miracle. He then dismisses the crowd, and the next day the crowd comes looking for him. But he knows they're looking for him. Why? Because he performed this miracle. They just want the physical food again. But he knows they need more than that. They need this heavenly food. And it's him. He talks about how he is the bread of life. He's the true bread that has come down from heaven. It's not only to be nurtured by his word, it's actually nurtured by his very life. And so that's why he talks about in the Bread of Life Discourse that he's going to give them the true bread from heaven that will feed not only physically, but to feed their souls, to share in the very life of God. And this is what's happening in the Eucharist. Every time we receive the Eucharist, we're being very nurtured by Christ himself. It's not bread. It is Jesus. It's the body and blood, soul and divinity. So this is what we're going to get into in the next few weeks. But this week with your kids, just help them understand how God knows we have needs. God provides for us. God gives us food, but in particular, more than physical food, God gives us this heavenly food, the bread from heaven, which is Jesus himself. That's all, everyone. Hope you have a great week. Get ready for Holy Week coming up this next week. Hopefully you can share in the many different experiences we're going to have. God bless everyone. Bye-bye.